The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Marcus Bennett signed the final employment paperwork at Blackwood Research Institute. The HR representative, a thin woman with wire-rimmed glasses and perfectly manicured nails, smiled without warmth as she collected the forms.
Welcome to the night shift, Mr. Bennett. Dr. Richardson will handle your orientation.
Marcus nodded, trying to ignore the gnawing feeling in his gut. The pay was too good. $32 an hour for glorified babysitting of empty labs? But after 6 months of unemployment, he couldn't afford to be picky. Dr. Richardson proved to be a tall man with graying temples and perpetually worried eyes. He walked Marcus through the sprawling facility, their footsteps echoing off sterile white walls and polished floors. The layout was a maze of interconnected corridors, all identical save for the numbered plaques beside each door.
All right, so the main security office is here.
Richardson explained, gesturing to a room filled with monitor screens.
Hourly rounds, check all access points, standard stuff, but
He hesitated, scratching his neck.
stay out of the B-Wing labs after midnight. Sensitive experiments. We, can't risk contamination.
What kind of experiments?
Richardson's laugh was forced.
Above your pay grade, son. Just remember, B-Wing is off limits after midnight. No exceptions.
The first 2 nights passed uneventfully. Marcus settled into the routine. Rounds, coffee, security feeds, more coffee. The facility was eerily quiet at night, with only the occasional researcher burning the midnight oil. He noticed most of them came from B-Wing, particularly Lab B7, where Dr. Sarah Chen worked. Dr. Chen fascinated him. Young, brilliant, always lost in thought as she passed his security station. She worked later than anyone, often until dawn. Sometimes he heard strange noises from her lab. Scratching sounds, low growls he assumed were from test animals. But whenever he checked the cameras, the feed was grainy and distorted. On the 3rd night, everything changed. The first sign was the blood. Marcus found it during his 2 a.m. rounds, crimson handprints smeared along the wall leading to B-Wing. His flashlight beam revealed a trail of shredded clothing, scattered papers, and deep claw marks gouged into the floor. The trail led to Lab B7. The door was ajar, its security panel sparking. Inside, chaos reigned. Broken glass crunched under his boots as he swept his light across overturned tables and smashed equipment. A laptop lay open on the floor, its screen cracked but still functioning. The last entry in a research log caught his eye.
Test subject showing unprecedented cellular regeneration. Genetic restoration proceeding faster than anticipated. But the changes, God help me, the changes are happening too fast. I can't control.
The entry ended abruptly. Below it was a video file labeled Protocol Omega. Marcus's finger hovered over the play button. A low growl froze him in place. It came from behind him, accompanied by the sound of claws clicking on tile. Hot breath touched the back of his neck. Slowly, fighting every instinct screaming at him to run, Marcus turned around. Yellow eyes gleamed in the darkness. They were set in a face that was neither human nor animal, but some nightmarish combination of both. The creature's lips pulled back, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. Marcus ran. He slammed the lab door shut behind him, hearing the beast crash against it with enough force to dent the metal. His radio crackled to life. Richardson's voice, urgent and terrified.
Bennett, lock down the facility. Don't let it...
The transmission cut off in a wet gurgle. Marcus sprinted for the security office, the creature's howls echoing through the corridors behind him. As he ran, the facility's lights began to fail, plunging sections into darkness one by one. He reached the office and hit the emergency lockdown button. Steel shutters slammed down over every exit. For a moment, he thought he was safe. Then the power went out completely, leaving him alone in the dark with whatever Dr. Chen had created. And somewhere in the facility, a second howl answered the first. The backup generator sputtered to life, bathing the security office in a sickly red emergency lighting. Marcus's hands trembled as he scanned through the camera feeds, most now showing only static or darkness. His breath came in short gasps, fogging the screens before him. The few working cameras revealed glimpses of devastation. Bodies lay scattered through the corridors, researchers who'd stayed too late, security guards who'd responded to Richardson's last call. Their faces were frozen in expressions of terror, limbs twisted at impossible angles. A movement caught his eye on camera 3. Dr. Chen stumbled into view, her lab coat torn and bloody. She pressed herself against a wall, shoulders heaving with each breath. Her skin seemed to ripple in the red light, as if something writhed beneath its surface. Marcus keyed the intercom.
Dr. Chen, get to the security office. I can protect you.
She looked up at the camera, her eyes wild and golden.
No, you don't understand. I'm not the one who needs protection.
Her voice distorted, becoming deeper, rougher.
I tried to cure it. All these years, keeping it contained with drugs, with therapy. But the treatment, it made it worse, made it spread.
The transformation began before his eyes. Her bones cracked and reformed, skin splitting as dark fur erupted across her body. Her scream of agony morphed into a howl that shook dust from the ceiling. Marcus switched cameras frantically, trying to track the other creature. He found it in B-Wing, massive shoulders hunched as it tore through a locked door like paper. The beast had been human once. He recognized the tattered remains of Richardson's coat hanging from its muscled frame. The pieces clicked into place. Richardson's warnings about B-Wing, the late-night experiments, the excessive pay for a simple security job. They hadn't hired him to keep people out. They'd hired him to keep something in. His radio crackled. Through the static, he heard voices.
Containment breach in sectors 7 through 12.
Multiple subjects loose.
Initiate Protocol Omega.
The laptop. The video file. Marcus pulled Dr. Chen's damaged computer from his bag, praying it still worked. The video began to play.
This is Dr. Sarah Chen, head of Project Lycaon. If you're watching this, our containment procedures have failed. The treatment was meant to cure those of us afflicted with the curse, but instead, it's mutated the condition, made it contagious. The transformed subjects retain their human intelligence while gaining pack mentality. They're coordinating, hunting. There's a fail-safe. In the sub-basement, there's a purge system. UV radiation, silver particulates in the ventilation. But it has to be activated manually. The override code is...
The screen went black. A low growl filled the room. Marcus spun around to find Dr. Chen's transformed shape filling the doorway, saliva dripping from foot-long fangs. Behind her, Richardson's massive form blocked the only escape route. They were hurting him, he realized, working together, hunting as a pack. His hand found the taser on his belt, standard issue, but the charge might buy him seconds. The sub-basement was 3 floors down. He'd have to run a gauntlet of transformed researchers, find the purge controls, and input a code he didn't have. Dr. Chen's muzzle split in what might have been a smile. When she spoke, her words were garbled but clear.
The night shift's just beginning, Marcus.
He fired the taser and ran. The sub-basement air hung thick with decay, each breath tasting of rust and abandonment. Marcus's flashlight beam cut through darkness that seemed almost alive, revealing corridors untouched by the emergency lighting above. His footsteps echoed wetly across floors slick with substances he refused to contemplate. The taser had bought him precious seconds, just enough time to slip through the maintenance access while the creatures recovered. But he could hear them now, their claws scraping against metal as they prowled the ventilation ducts overhead. Hunting. Waiting. His hand traced the cold wall, fingertips catching on strange gouges that felt suspiciously like claw marks. How long had this been going on? How many others had tried to reach the purge controls, only to become prey in this underground labyrinth? A distant sob echoed through the darkness. Marcus froze, straining to listen. It came again, human, desperate, coming from behind a heavy steel door marked primary storage. The sound of someone still alive. Every instinct screamed trap, but he couldn't leave someone behind. The door creaked open at his touch, revealing rows of massive containment tubes filled with murky liquid. Inside each, dark shapes floated like twisted specimens in a mad scientist collection. As his light played across the tubes, he realized with horror that they weren't specimens at all. They were failed experiments. Human forms caught mid-transformation, frozen in eternal agony. The sobbing grew louder. At the far end of the room, a figure huddled in the corner. A young researcher, her lab coat stained with blood.
Please,
She whispered.
help me.
Marcus approached cautiously, taser raised.
Are you injured?
She looked up and his blood ran cold. Her eyes were Chen's eyes. Golden, predatory, hungry.
Not anymore.
The transformation was instantaneous this time. No gradual mutation, just an explosion of fur and fang and claw. Marcus fired the taser, but she was already moving, impossibly fast. Pain lanced through his shoulder as teeth sank deep and he stumbled backward, crashing into one of the containment tubes. Cracks spiderwebbed across its surface. The creature that had been a researcher circled him, letting him see his death approaching. Then another shape dropped from the ceiling, Richardson, even larger in the confined space. But instead of attacking Marcus, it slammed into the female, sending both creatures tumbling in a savage whirlwind of snapping jaws and razor claws. Marcus ran. The purge control room waited at the end of a long corridor, its reinforced door hanging open. Inside, screens flickered with diagnostic data, and a simple keypad waited for the override code. But what was it? What had Chen been trying to tell him? Movement in the doorway. Dr. Chen's transformed shape filled it, blood matting her dark fur. Behind her, Richardson's massive form emerged from the shadows, both creatures advancing with terrible purpose. Chen's distorted voice rasped,
You don't understand what you're doing. The treatment didn't fail. It worked too well. We're evolving, becoming something greater.
Marcus backed away.
You're killing people.
No, we're saving them. The bite spreads the cure. Soon everyone will be free from human weakness.
Her muzzle split in that terrible smile.
Starting with you.
The creatures tensed to spring. Marcus's fingers found the keypad. What was the code? What had Chen been trying to protect? Then he saw it. The project name in her video. Lycaon, the first werewolf in Greek mythology. With trembling fingers, he punched in the letters. The creatures leaped. Marcus hit enter. Brilliant ultraviolet light flooded the facility. Silver particles hissed through the ventilation system like deadly rain. The creatures' howls of triumph became screams of agony as their flesh began to smoke and bubble. Chen's golden eyes locked with his one final time.
You'll never be sure.
Gasped through melting fangs.
Never know if the bite took. Every full moon you'll wonder.
Then there was only silence and the acrid smell of burning flesh. Hours later, as hazmat teams swarmed the facility, Marcus sat in an ambulance, bandages wrapped around his shoulder. The bite throbbed in time with his heartbeat. Above, the moon hung full and heavy in the sky, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Marcus smiled. After all, the night shift wasn't over yet. Thanks for listening. I was going to make this video a double feature since this one is a bit short, but I decided that sometimes short is a good thing. Let me know what you thought of the story, and if you have any story suggestions, I'm open to them. Until next time.